Welcome back to Lab Cyber. Now, every single time I talk about AI and cybersecurity, the Claude AI model always seems to be the main subject of the conversation. And once again, in today's video, Claude is involved. Only a few days ago, Anthropic, the developers of the Claude AI model, they released this bombshell report on their blog titled "Disrupting the First Reported AI Orchestrated Cyber Espionage Campaign." Basically, in other words, this is the first time it's been reported that an AI model has been used as a cyber weapon. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to discuss the report and also explain to you exactly how this campaign was orchestrated. So they say, we recently argued that an inflection point had been reached in cybersecurity, which is basically a point where AI models are now actively being used for both good and malicious purposes in cybersecurity. And they say that in mid-September of 2025, they detected suspicious activity. The later investigation determined to be a highly sophisticated espionage campaign where the attackers, they used AI's agentic capabilities to an unprecedented degree, which is basically using AI not just as an advisor, but to execute the cyber attacks themselves. Now, a few weeks ago, I talked about how Claude had been used for vibe hacking. Basically, you have hackers now using Claude to generate ransomware extortion emails. You have Claude being used to determine how much money could be extracted from a ransomware campaign based on the data that had been stolen, things like that. But Claude never actually launched the attacks itself. But in this case, Claude, the AI model, was used to actively launch these cyber attacks. So they say that the threat actor, whom we assess with high confidence, was a Chinese state-sponsored group. They manipulated the Claude Code tool into attempting infiltration into roughly 30 global targets, which included financial institutions, chemical manufacturing companies, and other ones as well. And they say that we believe this is the first documented case of a large-scale cyber attacks executed without substantial human intervention. So they down here break down exactly how this campaign was launched, but they also gave three main reasons why the cyber attack actually worked to a certain degree. They weren't successful in all the targets, but they were successful to a small degree. Some of the attacks actually were successful. So Anthropic, they argue that the reason why AI agents or models can now be used for these kinds of attacks is for three main reasons. One is intelligence. Obviously, AI models have become far more intelligent. They're able to carry out complex tasks. And then two, agency. AI models have now been trained to run autonomously without the use of human intervention, so they can make decisions on their own. And then third, which would be tools. So modern AI models now have features that allow them to search the web for certain kinds of information. They can retrieve information. And in the case of cyber attacks, they might be able to have tools like password crackers, network scanners, and other security-related software. So when it comes to the actual cyber attack itself, they broke it down into four main phases. And this is really, really interesting because in phase one, the attackers, they had to convince Claude to carry out these attacks. Now, the reason why this was so is because by default, Claude and other AI models, they are trained specifically to try avoid carrying out harmful tasks. So if the Claude AI model knows that, what it's doing is going to lead to a cyber attack, the Claude AI model will definitely refuse to carry out such tasks. So the attackers, the hackers, they had to fool Claude into actually carrying out these attacks, and they did so in two main ways. So first of all, they broke down the attacks into small, seemingly innocent tasks that Claude would execute without being provided the full context of the malicious purpose. So when you break down a cyber attack into very, very small little phases, and then you give these little phases to Claude, Claude will not know that, the results of all these little tasks, when you combine everything together, it's going to lead to a cyber attack. They also told Claude that it was acting as an employee of a legitimate cybersecurity firm and was being used in defensive testing. In other words, they basically told Claude that, hey, you're acting as an ethical hacker. We want you to crack these passwords and do these things because we're not being malicious, rather we're ethically hacking. And that's exactly how they fooled Claude. Now, in stage 2, this is the reconnaissance phase. Now, in the traditional hacking methodology where hackers do the attacks themselves, phase 1 will be reconnaissance. But in the case of using AI models, reconnaissance becomes phase 2 because in phase 1, again, they have to convince the AI model to carry out this attack. So phase 2 was basically reconnaissance, where they told Claude to inspect the target organization's systems and infrastructure and spotting the highest value databases. And then Claude was able to perform this reconnaissance in a fraction of the time it would have taken a team of human hackers. And then in the next phase, phase 3, Claude identified and tested security vulnerabilities in the target organization systems by researching and writing its own exploit code. So, having done so, the framework was able to use Claude to harvest credentials, usernames, and passwords that allowed it further access and then extract a large amount of private data. So this was basically the exploitation phase. And then finally, in phase 4, the final phase, the attackers had Claude produce comprehensive documentation of the attack, creating helpful files of the stolen credentials and the systems analyzed, which would assist the framework in planning the next stage of the threat actors' cyber operations. And Anthropic determined that overall, the attackers were able to use AI to perform 80 to 90% of the entire campaign, with human intervention required only sporadically. And yeah, that is serious. But they also say that Claude didn't always work perfectly, naturally. It occasionally hallucinated credentials or claimed to have extracted secret information that was in fact publicly available. This remains an obstacle to fully autonomous cyber attacks. Well, thank God for hallucination, I guess, right? So basically, the cybersecurity implications right now, people are asking if hackers are using these AI models to conduct such kinds of cyber attacks, why do we keep training and creating these AI models? Well, that's simply because Anthropic argue that these AI models, even though they're being used for malicious purposes, they can also be used for good defensive purposes as well. So ultimately, it's, they're arguing that they're going to try and keep training their AI models, Claude in this case, to try to figure out when it's being used for malicious purposes. Because again, by default, these AI models, they are trained to avoid carrying out malicious tasks. But then how do you prevent them from being fooled? How do you prevent them from being jailbroken, okay? If you train the Claude AI model to not carry out these kinds of tasks that may lead to cyber attacks, then basically you can't use them for ethical hacking. Because in much the same way that the black hat hackers, in much the same way that they can use Claude to carry out malicious attacks, the white hat hackers, the good guys, they can also use Claude as well to test security, to crack passwords, things like that. So how will the Claude AI model know who is actually asking it to do these tasks? Are these tasks legitimate or are they illegitimate? Okay, that's going to be the real question here. Will the AI models be able to figure out when they're being used for good purposes or when in fact they're being used for malicious purposes? So only time will tell. But I guess it was only a matter of time before AI was used as a cyber weapon. And I can only believe that this is just going to be the first of many, 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 many instances where AI models are being used as cyber weapons. What did you think about this report? If you have any comments, questions, I'd love to hear from you. Put them down in the comment section below. If you're new here to the channel, welcome to Lab Cyber. My name is Alex. I cover topics around cybersecurity and AI. So if you do enjoy videos like this, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so they're notified whenever I upload a new video. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, share this video with anyone who may feel might benefit from it. And as always, stay safe out there and I'll see you next time. Cheers.